Hello, everyone. Well, we have a new topic here, topic 5 on controls, which follows topic 4 on displays. The two go together very nicely. And I've got 3 subtopics here. So the first one, we're going to talk about a case study with Mr. Sunshine on my shoulders here, and an actual event that happened, which involved an issue with control design that I hope you'll see kicks off this topic fairly well here. So, all right. So this case study involves John Denver, Mr. Sunshine on my shoulders. So, an American folk singer, a folk legend, some would say, and also a highly experienced private pilot. In 1997, he was killed in a one-man aircraft crash while he was flying this experimental aircraft, not this one, but an experimental aircraft. And as you'll see, we're going to talk about how this stemmed very much so from the design of the controls and the system around the controls. And if you want to read some more, I have posted the chapter from the Atomic Chef called Rhymes and Reasons, and this tells more details about the story here. I posted that under the supporting materials for this topic. Okay, so there is a world of experimental aircraft, which is pretty exciting to me, which is, build yourself, build it your own, and, and then it's airworthy. And one of these models is called a Long Easy. Okay, so this model here, very similar to what John Denver had purchased. And he basically was going, he basically traveled to purchase this aircraft and then was essentially test flying it before the purchase here. So he's flying it. There are two 26-gallon fuel tanks located within the roots of each of the wings here. Fuel is an issue here. The displays of the level in each of those tanks are somewhat difficult to see in this particular model, especially from the main pilot's seat. Now, this is a two-seater, and someone sitting in the back could see it a little more readily, but in this case, John Denver was flying solo. And so here's an example, or I made this illustration here, but if you can imagine, this is the base of the wing, okay, and then the wing extends out this way. This is how the fuel would fill in that space. And so there's a nonlinear relationship between the amount of fuel and then this float here, which was used in the fuel sighting gauge. Okay, so this little red float would basically sit on top of the fluid and tell the pilot, you have half a tank, you have a third of the tank, or whatever. But recognize that it does not map to a linear consumption of the fuel. And so suddenly, we get closer to the bottom, it is potentially going to go much more rapidly. This right here is a picture of the fuel selector switch. And so there are two fuel tanks, one under each wing. And the way this very, very lightweight aircraft works is you need to kind of specify which fuel tank you're pulling fuel from. And this matters because, obviously you run out of fuel in one side, you want to tap into the other, but it matters for weight distribution. And so this valve right here was used to select which tank to draw from, very commonly while you're flying this aircraft, switching from one to the other. And having that fuel level indicator is obviously important for deciding which tank to go with. Okay. Now, this was an experimental aircraft, and so one of the the things that they advertise with these is you can modify it. You can make it your own, which is interesting if you are yourself going to fly this aircraft. But if you're going to then sell it to someone else who's unfamiliar with your modifications, that could be a very potential problem. So this home-built design rerouted the fuel lines so that they were around the cockpit and supposedly for more safety. So more room in the cockpit, but in this case, makes it that much harder to see the fuel levels. And so now we have the fuel tank selector is now in an awkward position behind the pilot. It's reachable, but in a somewhat awkward position. So a pole adapter was built so that, you know, I can reach around here and I can turn essentially that valve to change which tank that I'm drawing from as I'm flying here, or as John Denver is flying. So it's over and behind my left shoulder that this pole exists. So I reach here and I can turn it. Okay. Now, with this modification, the control mapping changed a little bit. And so what you can see is up became off. Moving at 90 degrees was to pull from the left tank. Moving it down to the bottom was to pull from the right tank. So left and right don't exactly map. Off doesn't exactly map necessarily, unless you are expecting that because you're the designer. But again, John Denver going and purchasing somebody else's plane, potentially unfamiliar with this. Okay, so this fuel tank selector only operable with the right hand because it's behind my left shoulder. I can't do it this way. So I got to reach around this way, right? And keep in mind, I'm in this very constrained cockpit. This is what a long easy might look like from the cockpit. I have very little wiggle room. It's not like I can get up and go and walk around. And so this is what it took in order to change which fuel tank was being drawn from. Here's what it took. So I'm strapped in, so I got to loosen my waist and shoulder straps. I got to have wiggle room. I got to push this to go autopilot because I'm taking my hands off of the yoke. I got to let go, the control stick. So I'm letting go of that now with my hand, and I'm twisting around 90 degrees, and I'm reaching for the fuel selector handle. Note that when I twist around here and I'm reaching for it, my field of view is compromised. I'm no longer necessarily looking, straight ahead. Okay. So John Denver, he's thinking about buying this plane, going to buy this plane, and is test flying it. And so he flew it, out somewhere and spends an overnight trip and is flying back in the morning, I suppose, to give the guy his check or something. So he knows he flew there with a certain amount of gas, and he said, okay, well, now I've got a quarter tank of fuel in my left tank. I've got a half a tank of fuel in my right. And I know that yesterday there was less than that amount consumed in the flight to this location. So if I flew with more than a quarter, if it didn't cost me as much to get here, it should be fine for me to get back, right? So I've got half a tank, I've got a quarter tank. However, John Denver was potentially unaware of that nonlinear relationship between the fuel level and actually what is being displayed in the fuel indicators. Okay, so with 1/4 of the level, if that's what's being specified, that's only about 3 gallons on a 26-gallon tank. So we're pretty close to the end here, and John Denver didn't know it. So first of all, I'd call this a displays problem. We have a displays problem in this case, underinformed as the pilot may be. Okay, so this idea of a touch and go, this is sort of like you're experimenting with aircraft, you're finding out how well do they fly. You may do this touch and go, so you kind of come in for a landing, but you don't slow all the way down. Maybe the wheels touch the ground, you take back off again, you go and joyride further. And so this is what John Denver was doing, very common way to test an aircraft. And after only about 500 feet in the air, altitude-wise, there is a pop sound. And this is the signal for, okay, the tank I was drawing from is now empty. It is no longer firing. Oh crap, quick, I better switch it to the other tank, okay? Problem is, I had just come in for a touch and go, so John Denver did not have much altitude to work with in terms of troubleshooting here. So I got to do all these things. I got to loosen my straps. I got to reach around. I got to adjust. And as it turned out, that was too much to try to do for the amount of time that falling 500 feet would take. And so, according to the reports, John Denver reached as best he could. He was tightly restrained. He didn't have time to wiggle out of his restraints. Reaching for that control around the behind the left shoulder. Got it or he didn't, we're not sure, but ultimately could not regain control of the aircraft, and it rolled hard to the right and it crashed into the sea. And we now have the John Denver Memorial plaque at the spot where he passed away. So very tragic, but very much a controls and displays based problem. And so if you want to read more of that, it's in Rhymes and Reasons on Canvas, and then tune in for the remainder of the controls lectures. Okay, thanks everyone.